Like a client of mine who's a lawyer. Well, they had no voice. They're always wrong. So they're always arguing for truth.
Oh,
All right.
yeah.
Even my in my first book, um, my ghostwriter was like, well, what's it say about me? And I'm like, you sure you want to know? She's like, yeah. And I said, okay, well, what is it you do? I write books. Who do you write them for? Other people.
Right.
So what does that tell you? You were not allowed to have your own voice. You can't have your own words. And so
Mhm.
now, just like it was as a child, you took care of your parents' voice and their words, and now you're just reliving that trauma against yourself.
Well, you did touch on the worst day cycle, and I actually wanted to ask you about that. So I'm not sure if you wanted to
Oh,
spend a
sure,
couple
I'm happy
minutes
to.
talking about it. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. Like, what is it, and how can people get out of that cycle?
um, there are four pillars to the worst day cycle: trauma, fear, shame, and denial. Every single one of us have been through childhood trauma. We're all traumatized. Now, when we experience trauma, it creates an emotional chemical addiction within us, fear. Because of that fear response and the inability to process it, and because it comes at the hands of our parents, remember what we've talked about, shame, we have to drop our authentic self for the
Mhm.
for the connection. Now that those three are so heavy on its own, and because we're too young and underdeveloped as a child to deal with it, and still as adults, most of the country, 80% of people say they never went through childhood trauma. And those three questions, what are you feeling? Where in your body do you feel, and what's your first memory, prove to everybody they're all caught in the worst day cycle and just reliving their trauma against themselves since
Mhm.
childhood.
Yeah.
They go into step four, denial. And this is where learning about this stuff really helps you, because what you learn about shame and denial, first of all, with shame, is there are two things going on. For us to heal, for one, we have to get into truth that we developed a false persona as a child. Like your career tells me your false persona. I know what your childhood trauma is. Like
Mhm.
a client of mine who's a lawyer. Well, they had no voice. They're always wrong. So they're always arguing for truth.
Oh,
All right.
yeah.
Even my in my first book, um, my ghostwriter was like, well, what's it say about me? And I'm like, you sure you want to know? She's like, yeah. And I said, okay, well, what is it you do? I write books. Who do you write them for? Other people.
Right.
So what does that tell you? You were not allowed to have your own voice. You can't have your own words. And so
Mhm.
now, just like it was as a child, you took care of your parents' voice and their words, and now you're just reliving that trauma against yourself. And that's what happens in the cycle. And so that's such an overwhelming truth, that I am detached from my authenticity, that I am living in a false persona, but that's only half of it. We have to get into truth. And this is what's difficult about recovery is, if I were to let go of these false personas that I developed for attachment, do you see what I would lose?
Mhm.
Attachment to mom and dad, even if they're dead, even if consciously we're like, well, no, that's the deep ingrained child feeling is, no, don't make me change because mom and dad won't love me if I let go of this.
Yeah.
And that's what kicks in denial. No, it's not true. I didn't go through trauma. It's not me. I love what I do. This isn't false. And so then they pick another narcissist, another career where the bosses are, you know, all they ever do is relive their trauma against themselves. It's literally everybody from the least successful to most successful. Your life story is just a reliving of your trauma against yourself, not on purpose, but because we're not told how the brain and body seeks to repeat what it's already experienced. It does this in everybody. Our
Mhm.
brain is designed to, it takes a minimum of 25% of all of our calories to run our brain. Its solution is to repeat what it's already done. It doesn't know the difference between good and bad, right and wrong. All it knows is I'm alive. So I'm going to do this. So that explains why the domestic abuse survivor can't leave, the person with the, all of these things, and why people are going, here I am again. Why does this keep happening? Well, that's the brain and body reliving the trauma, fear, shame, and denial. I could put a person in a room with 20,000 people and I know who they'll pick based on their childhood trauma. I just put one of them in there and like radar, they'd come out. Oh, they're all attractive. They're just what I want. But there's something special about this one. So
Mm-hmm.
it's much more in depth. That's the basic idea. But again, so you have the worst day cycle consists of trauma, fear, shame, and denial. Its solution is the emotional authenticity method of truth, responsibility, healing, and forgiveness. And that's how you solve it. And so my first book lays out the cycle. My second book goes deeper in it. And then, between my book and my classes gives you the process to heal it.